It was 32 years ago that I first got into this field. How did I get into this field? By accident. Sort of like the monkey who fell out of the tree. My company, which I had at the time, was involved up until 1956 in very extensive network radio programs, which means dramatic programs for radio nationwide and overseas. And in 1956 we had the choice of whether we converted all the way into television. And so we had started to do so until we discovered a very interesting thing. Now, we had been doing these radio programs for many years, and what we discovered was that it was like seeing a movie all over again. It was this is where we came in, because we were taking exactly the same thing that we had done 8 to 10 years earlier and putting a picture to it. It was nothing more to us than radio with a picture. So we did not think that we wanted to go through this all over again. There must be something better to do than to go into television. And we had already 2 quiz shows in television and found that this was nice, but there must be something better. So as the head of the company, and knowing in American language you have something that says you pass the buck. The buck ends with the president of the company, the responsibility, as does the authority. So I decided we would try something else, and being very professional in sound, we naturally began to think of some way to use sound as a new means of a new direction for our company. And what we first came up with and started conducting in our research and development division of our company was how to help people learn while they are asleep. Very interesting parable that all the way back in 1956 we started conducting studies how to do this. And the first problem is how to get people to sleep. Because you can't take a subject and say, now go to sleep. You have to, and you do not want to give them chemicals or drugs to go to sleep, because that won't serve the purpose. So we began to use sound to help people to get to sleep. And that's how we first began to get into the technology of what we have since become. But along the way, a very interesting thing took place. In that research pattern, I was the chief subject because I demanded it, because I was very curious. So as the chief subject in all of these patterns of finding ways to help people go to sleep by sound use, evidently I absorbed something. Because in 1958 then, I had this great, frightening, terrifying change take place in my life. And I have written about this, as you know, in several books, and it's very, I guess, common knowledge even throughout the world, because the books have been translated into various languages. But simply put, at that time I began to experience moving out of my body. And that was the final thing of something that had begun a year at least or more before that time. I began to have, quote, dreams about, and I was an airplane pilot, so you can understand how that would take place. I began to have dreams about taxiing to the runway on an airport and getting the plane off the ground, and once I got it off the ground, that I would look up and here are all these wires. It was as if one were flying down a street, and there were all these power lines overhead and telephone lines, and you couldn't find a hole to get out of it. And that dream had gone on, a recurring dream, for at least a year. And then, shortly before this big thing took place in 58. I also began to experience a funny kind of vibration. And I went to it was as if my body were shaking, but there was no feeling of shaking. It was just internal. And I went hurrying to my favorite doctor, and he examined me and says, "Oh, you are working too hard. You are stress-filled, but there's nothing wrong with you. Go take a pill and relax or something." Well, not necessarily being a pill taker, that did not work too well. But in any event, after many times, like 25 or 30 more times of experiencing this vibration, I thought, well, and fighting to get out of it is the point. I just pull myself away from this vibration. The next step was, well, this will never get anywhere. I'm too frightened about it. If it's going to kill me, let it kill me. So, with that in mind, one particular afternoon when I was lying down, I said, all right, fine. The vibration came. If it's going to kill me, let it kill me. So I waited and waited and waited. And after a while, after about 5 minutes, it faded away, and I was still alive. So I thought, now I know it won't kill me. So I'm on safe ground. So after that, I began to simply let it happen and wait that 5 minutes so I could do something. And on this one famous night, as we're in 1958, I was lying in bed on a Friday night, waiting for this vibration to end so I could go to sleep. And as I was lying there, thinking about what I was going to do the next day, while this vibration got through doing what it was supposed to do, I was thinking how nice Saturday morning was going to be, because we had what we call a cold front come through, and there would be strong northwest winds, and there would be great thermal action. So, being much into sailplanes and gliders at that time, the soaring was going to be tremendous. And as a result, this was my sense of great joy and anticipation as I was waiting for this vibration to end. And as I waited and waited and thought how nice this is going to be, suddenly I felt something bumping against my shoulder. And that, of course, is part of the history when I discovered that what I was bumping against was the ceiling of my bedroom. And that bumping turned around, and I did not know where I was till I saw this funny sort of a fountain coming out of what I thought was the floor. And I thought, where am I? This is a funny kind of dream. And I looked more closely, and I thought, there's something terribly wrong. This is not a fountain, this is the chandelier, the light fixture coming out of the ceiling. So I looked around, and sure enough, down there in the bed below me was my wife lying in bed, and beside her was a man in bed. And I says, what kind of dream is this? This is a strange dream. Whom would I think of who would be in bed with my wife? And I said, I can't resist finding out. So I moved a little closer, and then this great shock came over me, because the person in bed with my wife was me. And then the fright came, the terror. What am I doing? Am I dying? Let me get back quick, something. So I went through the air like this, swimming through the air to get back to the body, and pang, got back in the body. That was the first time that I, in turn, found out. And then very quickly I sat up, and everything was quiet. My heart was racing because I was excited, but everything else was fine. My wife's asleep, quiet, nothing, no problem. So that is exactly how it began, all the way back in 1958.